At Academy Sports and Outdoors, we've got the trusted brands you need for hunting season in Texas. Gear up with a wide selection of rifles, ammo, and optics at unbeatable prices. Plus, find all you need to attract and scout big game all season like deer corn and game cameras. Need a hunting license? We've got that in-store too. Swing by your local Academy today or shop academy.com for free in-store pickup. Get everything you need for your next hunt at Academy Sports and Outdoors and have fun out there.
Hey everyone, this is Captain Steve Roger from Into the Blue TV. And as soon as I feel a little break from this heat, I know that hunting season is upon us. Actually, the first time I ever went hunting, a buddy took me. Wasn't my father or my grandfather. In fact, I took my father on his very first hunt. Well, Academy Sports and Outdoor Stores has everything to gear up for the field for less. Plus, you can shop a wide selection of ammo, shotguns, deer corn, rifle, feeder, game cameras, camo, and more from the brands you trust. Text HUNT24 to 22369 to take $20 off a $100 purchase when you shop hunting supplies at academy.com. Need a hunting license? Pick it up in store while you're shopping.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. 312, that is the episode you are listening to. And this finds us at an interesting and exciting point in Casting Across history, because this week we're celebrating 9 years of Casting Across. Yes, 9 years. October of 2015 is when this all got started. A few more words about that at the end of the podcast, but I didn't want to use this as a lame excuse to simply do a clip show or something like that. And we're going to actually talk about things in fly fishing that I've changed my mind on over the years. Now, this could be something I've changed my mind on in the last few years, or something that's changed in all of the years that I've been fly fishing. But the reason why I'm sharing this is a fewfold. Okay, one is because you may be where I am, or you may be where I was, and so there may be something helpful in understanding that process. And secondly, just to expose you to maybe the other side of the argument if you are staunchly entrenched in one camp or another. And hopefully, and this is not something I've necessarily changed my mind on, but hopefully you don't have feelings that are so strong that you are staunchly entrenched in anything in fly fishing. There's many more important things in this world to be staunchly entrenched in than what kind of fly you're using, what kind of rod you are casting, etc. But that's actually the first one that I'm going to start with. And for a long time, I really enjoyed fast fly rods. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that my very first real fly rod was a 7'3" weight. That's very fast. I mean, it's probably listed as medium fast, but because the taper is such that the butt section, that first really 3 feet of that rod, is very, very stiff, it is a delightfully crisp small stream fly rod. And if you've listened to any of my content on small stream fly rods, you know that I actually kind of go against the grain, and I really like fast small stream fly rods as long as they have a delicate tip. And so this kind of translated into my other casting endeavors. I mean, if you learn to cast on a short fly rod, 6.5, 7.5 feet, then having a fast fly rod is not only essential in being able to cast long distances, but it's going to really inform the way that your casting stroke develops. So when I went to go get another fly rod, something in the 9-foot range, I think a 9'6" weight, I felt like my medium fast action 9'6" weight was the slowest thing in the world, and I didn't like it. And so I actually defaulted to, even on large rivers, even for bigger fish, using that 7'3" weight. And it took me a while, and it took me actually working at a fly shop and casting a lot of rods and learning that I had to learn to adapt my stroke to different actions and styles of fly rods. Not just different actions, but different actions across the entire spectrum of lengths and weights, that I really began to appreciate slower rods. And this really achieved its pinnacle when I bought my first custom bamboo fly rod, which is going on, oh boy, almost 15 years now. And realizing that this was now part of how I'm going to fish with this rod. And after that other bamboo came into the picture. I started buying fiberglass rods, and then I started acquiring and fishing with slower graphite rods. Now, I would have to say that outside of some small stream fly rods, which I like to be kind of quick and snappy, most of my large river rods, and also with the exception of my saltwater rods, pretty much everything in the middle, kind of my 4s up to my 7s, which is the majority of my warm water fishing and my trout fishing, are a medium to medium fast action. And the reason for that is a few. One reason I like that is because I feel like I can do more with a slower action rod. So again, still medium, broaching to the medium fast, but another caveat here. I think that especially in the last 20 years, what is called medium fast, maybe 20 years ago, is called medium now, just because the fast have even gotten faster. Higher modulus graphite, different sort of bonding agents, things like that have caused those the fast rods from yesterday to really become more of a medium fast. But all that to say, I like how you have a little bit more flexibility in what you can do with a medium fast fly rod. You really can alter your casting stroke to impart a lot more energy into your back cast and into your forward cast, but you can also slow down and allow the line to do a lot of the work, pulling and pushing your rod if you are wanting to cast at a slower pace. So I think also for teaching casting, this is the ideal action to use because your mistakes are not extrapolated much more quickly along the course of the fly line's trajectory. So a medium to medium fast rod is just a really good thing. A lot of manufacturers offer them somewhere in their line. Generally speaking, it's not going to be their highest end rod, which is also nice. So it's again, this is more of an overgeneralization, but you find a lot of fast rods at kind of that mid-level price, and a lot of fast rods at that high level price, because I feel like manufacturers want that highest end rod to be something that somebody feels like they can shoot out 80 or 90 feet of line if they want to. But then also people who are saying, oh, I want a good value, they pick up a rod, it feels really light, crisp, and responsive. It's also going to be a faster action, a faster taper. It's kind of that more mid to high, probably the $500 to $600 fly rod, which is a completely great price point for buying a really nice rod. Those rods are going to be in that nice sweet spot. But again, different manufacturers have different strokes and different perspectives. So, but anyway, that's one of the things where I've changed my opinion. And a lot of that came from time on the water and time with other fishing rods and trying things that were outside of my comfort zone. I still like fishing my short, fast fly rods, but now that there's more options for me, I feel like I am better equipped across a greater spectrum of opportunities and activities when I'm on the water. So that's the first one. The second one is kind of going on its heels. So this is another gear-related one. You've probably heard it said before that for trout, you don't really need much of a reel. You don't need a good drag system because you can always, if you have a click pawl style drag, something that just uses a spring, a little piece of metal, then you can palm it and you can slow down a good charging fish. Well, I don't argue with that so much as I argue with the fact that you need a good reel as far as good reel components. The more metal, the less plastic. The more machine, the less die cast, the better it's going to be. Now, don't get me wrong. I have some reels I absolutely love that have plastic pieces that are die cast, but the more and more I've fished, the more and more I've come to appreciate the benefits of a well-machined reel, even if it is just a trout reel. And there's a few reasons for that. Generally speaking, there's going to be a lot more precision in the process of manufacturing. And that manifests itself in a few places. First and foremost, the tolerances are much tighter. So whether it be how the real proper spool fits inside of that frame, or whether it be how the drag knob attaches or the handle attaches, or anything else that goes onto the inside of the body of that reel. Even again, if it's just a click pawl system, it's not some sort of fancy disc drag, but even more so if that's the case. Having those machined reels is going to feature tolerances that are tighter, things that are smoother. You're not going to have any sort of wonkiness. Of course, bad eggs make it out of quality control all the time, but they not only are flow much smoother through the process of stripping line out and reeling, but in my opinion, they take abuse a little bit better as well. And I think they have more longevity. And I'm just adding caveat after caveat. They can be disassembled, and I feel like when I'm disassembling things that are mostly made out of metal and machine metal, that I have a lot more confidence in being able to put them back together without having any problems. It's not something that you can tight, ad infinitum to the point where you're going to break something. It is going to something you can take apart easily and put back together easily. So, again, if your budget doesn't allow for this, then I get it. But if you are able to get into a nice machined reel with very few plastic parts. Now, of course, there's some really, really high-end, quality-made plastic nylon components. And of course, when you get into disc drag, you're going to be having some very, very nice nylon components that actually comprise that very nice drag system. But when it comes to some of the parts that hold the reel together, the less plastic is generally better, and it reflects a quality in workmanship. And it's a reel that's going to last you a really long time. So again, of course, it's the, buy once, cry once. If you buy a really high-end trout reel, you may not engage that drag on any significant sized fish. You may not have them stripping lots and lots of line out of your reel, but it's going to hold up over the long term at whatever, $250, probably twice to three times as long as maybe a $125 reel maybe. So that's something that I've changed my mind on. I never, again, bought into the whole that a trout reel is simply something to hold line, but I think that it is worthwhile, if you have a few more dollars, to consider a well-made machined reel. All right. The next thing is not going to be gear related. I have one more gear related one here at the end, but the next one has to do with stock trout. So some of this is a product of my environment, where I grew up fly fishing and where I lived fly fishing for a number of years. I was spoiled in that wild trout were my quarry. And more than that, native trout were also my quarry. So if you find a good podcast episode, actually something I might revisit as I kind of, rethink some of the things I've said over the years in light of or in the spirit of this podcast episode. I have a podcast episode called Wild Stocked and McDonald's or something like that. And it's early, maybe in the top first 10 or 15 or 20 episodes on Casting Across podcasts. But the idea that what a native versus wild versus stock trout is, I'm going to get that out of the way before I explain how I changed my mind. So a native trout is a trout that has been there since the flood, right? Since the glacial recession, whatever. So again, East Coast United States, that's brookies. East slope of the Rockies, generally that's going to be cutthroats. West slope and into the coast is going to be rainbows. No native brown trout in the United States of America. Never ever say you caught a native brown here on these shores of the New World. But you do have wild brown trout, and wild brown trout are brown trout that were introduced a long time ago, and they have become a self-sustaining, naturally reproducing population. So you may have wild rainbow trout on the east coast of the United States. You certainly have lots of wild brook trout on the west coast and in the Rocky Mountains. They have become self-sustaining and naturally reproducing. But this may be good. So, for example, a lot of the big brown trout rivers here on the East Coast, they are not native fish. And so, although we hate all other invasive species, we absolutely love our invasive brown trout because they get big and strong, and they occupy a great niche for sportsmen. But maybe up in the Rockies, where the cutthroats are not having a great recovery effort in maintaining or establishing a footprint in their natal or their historic range, the brookies that are naturally producing, that are wild, are a little bit of a burden. All right. Well, anyway, I'm going beyond the scope of what I was going to say, what I've changed my mind about. Because then the third category, native wild, but then is stocked. And these are fish that have been put in by the state, by some sort of private entity, maybe even in some situations by the federal government, and they're there for your angling pleasure, but there's not a high level of probability that they're going to stick around and naturally reproduce. And I think that's good. We shouldn't be stocking fish in places where fish can naturally reproduce with unless there's a high level of oversight and just paying attention to what's going on. But what does this have to do with things I've changed my mind on? I used to be very much anti-stocked fish, and I realized that was from the fact that I didn't have to worry about stocked fish. There was rivers with stocked fish around me, but I didn't mess with them at all because I had such a glut of riches and other resources that were near me. Well, now I live where I live in southern New England, and the trout fishing is phenomenal, especially as I drive a little bit further away from where I am in southern New Hampshire. And I can get into awesome native and wild trout fishing, but the rivers around me are primarily stock trout fisheries. The environment has had some difficulty with one reason or another. And so they've had to really supplement any lingering wild fish, maybe even some native brookies, with stocking. And I can't be a chooser because, in that sense, I am a beggar. And this was something that I came to a conclusion of not only out of necessity, but out of humility, because I've been humbled, I think, more on some of these stocked trout rivers than I have in a lot of these native trout streams. The native trout streams that I fished in South Central Pennsylvania, and through Maryland, and through the Shenandoah region, and the wild fisheries that I fished there, I generally had really good success. But I struggle a lot more, and I still do, with some of these stock trout fisheries. And you could make the argument, and if I wanted to make myself feel better, I could, make the argument that, these fish are dumb. That's why I'm a true fly fisher, so I can't pattern something that wants to eat Purina. I'm not going to fish mount flies. I'm not going to fish, squiggly worm. What do they call it? Squirmy worms, squiggly worms. There goes all my trash fly street cred. Yeah, I'm not gonna fish squirmy worms. I want to fish the Catskill Scale Dries, and if these fish don't want them, then I don't want them either. Well, that's not the case. I mean, they are not necessarily the easiest fish to catch, and you have to pattern them, and you have to figure them out, and they get hammered by people, and they get hammered by muskrats, and they get hammered by herons, and so it does take an extra something to figure them out. So I've truly have changed my mind on what it takes to get into stocked fish. So that's the third thing. First thing, fly rod action. Second thing, trout reel quality. Third thing, stocked fish. And then fourth thing, actually, there's going to be five. So the fourth thing I'm going to say real quickly, boot foot waders are not the worst thing in the world. I've probably said it here before, like you don't want to buy boot foot waders. And I said that, and I do think that for the vast majority of people, having separate boots and waders that you can customize to you, and then boots that you can tie and cinch up tight, is the best thing. But after hunting in boot foot waders for like 3 or 4 years now, they're not terrible. In fact, the fact that their insulation in the feet and in the body of the waders, in some cases, I would take that insulation over the foot and ankle support that I would get in a pair of separate boots and waders. But that's kind of more gear stuff. I want to switch to something else. But that's the fourth one. Fifth one is, this goes all the way back to when I was a teenager. When I started fly fishing, I thought this was all about fish. Catching fish, enjoying catching fish, catching more fish, acquiring more gear to catch more fish. But I'm very thankful that when I was 16, 17 years old, I went to the Pennsylvania Rivers Conservation Fly Fishing Youth Camp, the original Trout Unlimited youth camp. It's been replicated dozens of times across the country, but the Pennsylvania camp, it was hammered into me the ecological stewardship that is required of those that use the resource. And I'm saying that with no caveats. It is something that we need to do, especially if we're fishing in imperiled places. Bare minimum, be responsible, pay, don't poach, don't break the law, pay for the licenses, because even though I am the last person to defend government spending and things like that, the vast majority of that money does go back to protect those resources. Pick up garbage, report poaching, take care of the resource, do what you're supposed to do, explain that to people who, in a kind and generous and encouraging way, to people who may not get it. If you have time, if you have opportunity, then get your feet wet. Instead of sending a $35 check to Trout Unlimited, I'm not saying anything is wrong with that. I actually have my renewal statement right in front of me. On top of that, get plugged in with a local chapter, help out through some sort of feet in the stream project, help out with some sort of initiative or fundraiser, help out with youth education. Do something, because I trust you and me more than I trust a bureaucrat. Even if you are a bureaucrat, I trust you in the trout fishing lifestyle that you possess more than in what you are doing as you lobby somebody or are lobbied by somebody. So I changed my mind. I actually, I probably told the story before, but as I became one of the directors of that camp years and years after I attended it, I was going back through old records and I found my essay and how it was graded. And a gentleman we became very close and I very much respect and enjoy. He marked me super low because he said in my my entry essay that I had no interest in conservation, and he was dead right. But I'm thankful they let me in because that was a formative experience for me. Changed my mind, got me to think bigger picture even as a kid. And I think that's the right thing to do. So if you're training up the next person in the way he should go as he goes fly fishing, as she learns how to cast, whatever it may be, then make sure you instill in them that that ethos of environmental protection and how it's baked into the cake of fly fishing. So there you go. 5 things. It was 4, and I threw an extra one in there. 5 things I've changed my mind on in some things, last few years, but in other things, that was, 25 years ago? Almost. Anyway, there you go. Something you changed your mind on? Let me know. Matthew@castingacross.com. All right, 2 things on the website this week. The first one was called 9 Thoughts for 9 Years. So this is my celebratory post where you can see a picture of me that's used in some of my bios for some projects that are going on right now. Over at the Fly Fishing Show website, you'll see that picture, and then also somewhere else pretty soon you'll see that picture. But 9 Thoughts for 9 Years. So these are 9 thoughts that are tangentially related to fly fishing, which, if casting across anything, it's tangential information related to fly fishing. Sometimes it's straight up, here's how to catch fish. But as you'll see in this post, 9 things that have some things to do with fly fishing, but really they're more important than fly fishing, and they inform fly fishing. Wednesday's article, here's my clip show, right? The mosts of casting across fly fishing. So here there's one of my favorite casting across logos. It's the duck camo humpy. And once you click on that, you'll see 9 posts. They are the 3 most viewed posts of 2023 and 24. The 3 most viewed posts during 2023, 2024. So the first category is things that came out in the last year. The second one is overall, what did people read in the last year? Then it could be, 10 years old. Well, it couldn't be. How about 9 years old? And then lastly, the 3 podcast episodes. And here's the cool thing. The 3 podcast episodes that got the most interaction and the most listens were some of those Cast 1 podcasts, which is awesome. Those Cast 1 podcasts were like total entry-level beginner information. So I am very excited that those are 3 of the most listened to podcasts. I actually think 4 of the top 10, or the top 4 were all Cast 1, and I think 6 of the top 10 were in that same category. So, I mean, if I know business, and I should do more of those. So perhaps you'll see more in the very near future. Last thing is the recommendation. And this week's recommendation, call it a cop-out, call it what you will, but at 9 years of the podcast, 9 years of the website, 312 episodes of the podcast, I just want to say thank you. And so my recommendation is to myself. It is to tell you thank you. If this is your first listen to the podcast, thank you for being a part of it. If you've been here since the beginning, thank you for being a part of it. If you have been reading the podcast, reading the website for 9 years, then my goodness. First of all, I'd love to hear. If you say, hey, I started in 2015, I would love to hear about that. So please let me know. That'd be fantastic. And if you've just started and you're like, hey, I found this, I'm interested in this, that, or the other, then also let me know. I think that is fantastic as well. Matthew@castingacross.com. Always happy to get your emails and your messages through whatever social media you choose to use. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.